Hey, welcome to everybody this afternoon for this podcast. Just dealing with the coronavirus that we're doing right now, and the tensions that we might be feeling, the fears we might be having, or anxiety. And so today with us, we've got Dr. Stephen Lytle and Dr. Cristina Sevadjian, both with Sparrow House, and we've been partnering with them for a while now. We've had some of our team members go there, and the help has been just amazing. And so we're very blessed to have both of them with us today to wrestle with some of the questions that we have. At the end, we'd love to get some feedback from all of you that would listen to this on feedback that you got on the podcast today, but also any follow-up questions that you might have if we do this again. So we're just thankful for that time. So let me begin by welcoming Stephen and Cristina to our time today. I'd like to have you all begin by telling us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, thanks. My name is Dr. Cristina Sevadjian. I'm one of the partners at Sparrow House Counseling. I work primarily and I'm over our child and adolescent team. So I work with parents, adolescents, and children. And that's one of my passions, is just helping families be healthier and healthier, equipping parents to be able to talk well with their children. And that's one aspect of our practice. And I'll let Steve talk a little bit more about the adult part of our practice.
Yeah, thanks, Cristina. Hi, this is Dr. Stephen Lytle. I'm also a partner with Sparrow House Counseling. And Henry, thanks again for giving us the time to come on and speak with you guys. So, we've noticed a big change over just the last week. This has moved so quickly, even through our offices, that it's impacting everyone. Our offices recently, we just moved over to a virtual format, so we can, keep being a resource, Henry, for you guys and for the rest of the community. And again, thanks for having us on.
Yeah, thank you. We're very glad to have you start. So, Cristina, if you want to start with some opening remarks, and then we'll dive into some questions that we've already been receiving from some of our team members.
Just as a background, if people are not familiar with Sparrow House Counseling, we're just a full-service practice, so we work with children and their parents as young as 3 to people in more senior age ranges, and we have a variety of services from marriages to addiction to parenting, children, adolescents, kind of like what we talked about. We just have different therapists that specialize in different areas. So just a little background on us. And like Steve said, right now we're still remaining a resource to the community by being able to offer virtual platforms, which I think is going to be really helpful to people during such a stressful period. We just want to be a resource and a continued support.
Oh, that's great. And again, thank you so much for how you guys have helped us for several years now. It's been a great partnership for us. So as we begin, I've got some questions. Some of them are going to be more general in nature. Some of them are pretty specific. So let me kick off with the first one. With all the downtime that we're experiencing, it's causing me to spend time reflecting on my life. How do I keep thoughts from going to dark places that I usually avoid, and to be able to stay busy? What would you think about that answer there?
Well, what we know about that a little bit is that a lot of times when we have downtime, we can often do this sort of life reflection. I think kind of getting at what the person in the question is talking about. And what tends to happen is if people look in the past, often they may look at past life regrets, which then can bring about kind of intense feelings of hurt and pain. Or other people tend to focus on the future, which especially during this period can cause a lot of anxiety. What we kind of recommend right now for people is it may be a great time to review and clarify your values. So what do you value in life? What's important to you? And are you living out of those values? So for example, if one of your values is your identity in Christ, how is it that, on a daily or weekly basis, you're living out of that value? So does that mean you're spending time, in scripture? Is that meaning maybe you might spend some more time after this coronavirus and we can all get back out? You might spend more time volunteering. I think it's a great time to do that values kind of check-in. I think it's not a great time to maybe reflect on hurtful and painful things, as that just can bring up and intensify a lot of feelings of distress. And since there's so much stress in the unknown during this time period, may not be the time for that. Also, this is a time when if you're really wrestling with these questions about maybe just kind of the meaning of life or the meaning of your life, it might be a good time to get some help in virtual counseling like we were discussing. I do think, though, as you have more time and more space to reflect, values clarification could be very useful.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. I think also this is really a great time to get people that when you're spending more time at home to be able to look for ways to encourage other people. Phone calls, notes. We had one individual share that their family was writing notes to a nursing home and just send them anonymously there. So I think there's a lot of things you can do that are more positive and not thinking about the dark places.
Yeah, even just,
Cristina,
I know a lot of people have just gone and checked on neighbors in their neighborhood, whether they've left a note or something like that. I think those are great times to just be able to serve those around you.
Yeah. Well, here's question two.
Lytle,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
I think Dr. Lytle had something to add.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Dr. Sevadjian. Yeah, Henry, it is an important time that Dr. Sevadjian mentioned that we tend to, when we reflect, we tend to look back in the past. And when we look back in the past, we tend to get stuck in some of the regrets of the past. And we focus on the future. We turn into a lot of what if thinking. What if this happens? What if this happens? And you can't help but look at all the forecasting that's going on in the news right now. It's going to be very fear-inducing because it's a lot of what if thinking. And the past is over. We can't do anything about it, and the future is not here yet. And so what's important, instead of what ifing or looking towards the regrets of the past, is to focus on what now. What can I do now? And a good way to reflect, like Cristina was saying, is really focusing on, if you've got this time, to focus on who Christ says you are. Really focusing on your identity in Christ, for just recognizing that you are chosen, that you're treasured, that you're fearfully and wonderfully made, that you're loved, and that you're rejoiced over. We don't get a lot of time just with the busyness of this world, getting a chance to reflect, and especially getting a chance just to quiet down on reflecting on who Christ says we are.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Well, here's question two. What are some conflict resolution techniques you would recommend for families as they navigate being quarantined?
So, Dr. Sevadjian, I'll take that if you don't mind.
Yep.
Conflict is definitely going to happen during this time. There's going to be a lot of stepping on each other's toes. So it's a very important time to remember to have grace for you and grace for your spouse and grace for your children. In this time where we can't get out enough or get out very much, and we don't get a chance to take many timeouts away from our spouse, we're going to be in close proximity to each other. And so tensions are going to get heated, and stuff that hasn't been worked through before, or patterns that continue to pop up in the marriage are going to pop up definitely during this time. So just remember to have grace for each other, grace and patience. And with grace and patience is the importance of having forgiveness for yourself and for your partner. Forgiveness is a decision. It's not just a feeling. There's a feeling of forgiveness that can come from making the decision to forgive. And forgiveness in any relationship, it's an automatic reset button. When I choose to forgive you, I'm resetting the whole relationship. And so being able to have grace, patience, and forgiveness during this time is extremely important. So with conflict, with any good conflict is going to come the importance of good communication. And in communication, the most important thing you can do during this time is just listen. You try to listen with the intent of understanding your spouse or your partner, with the hope of coming into an agreement. Being able to agree on something is not the most important part of communication. And in any good relationship, in any good marriage, it's not likely to happen every time. And so you don't focus so much on who's right, who's wrong, or can we come into an agreement. You simply focus on the importance of just listening to each other with the intent of trying to understand. And it's also important during this time in conflict is to validate your partner's feelings. There's going to be feelings that are involved, especially now, just with the overwhelming amount of stress and anxiety and worry that is just pervading every aspect of our lives. There's going to be a lot of tension, and from that can be a lot of anger, a lot of criticism, things that really tend to break down communication. So again, it's important just to validate that you have feelings, that your spouse has feelings, and giving each other space to talk. In that, knowing that there's 4 things that can break down communication when you're going through conflict. The first of these is going to be criticism. It's very important to work on not criticizing each other. So criticism is name calling, labeling, blaming. It's an attempt to put your partner or your spouse down. And what happens is when criticism comes in, communication tends to shut down. Because when your partner feels that you're criticizing them, they'll tend to get defensive. And defensiveness is a wall up. It blocks the ears off to hearing what you have to say. So criticism and defensiveness go hand in hand. With that, we also know that something can come, which is we call stonewalling. So even though you're in the same house with each other, the same apartment with each other, the same proximity with each other, it doesn't mean that you're going to communicate with each other verbally. You can just shut down. And stonewalling is saying that I'm not going to listen to what you have to say anymore. It's a little different than taking a timeout. Timeouts in communication, and in particular in conflict, are very healthy. They give us a chance to calm down, open our ears back up, and come back into the conversation. Stonewalling is a refusal to talk about what's really what's really happening. And the last of these that can break down communication in conflict resolution is contempt. It's treating your partner or your spouse with contempt. And what that means is that what I'm saying, I value of more importance than what you're saying. And so I'm really not interested in hearing what you have to say. I'm more interested in you hearing what I have to say. And so anytime the 4 of those aspects are present in conflict, criticism, defensiveness, stonewalling, or contempt, communication is going to break down, and you stop listening to each other with the intent of trying to understand each other. And so you're not going to resolve conflict very well.
Wow, that's really good. So do you think the added time at home together, which is really, when you look at families, we do live together, but we're not in the same vicinity like we've been this past week. So you think that opens the door to those 4 components?
I think more so because we're around each other more.
Yeah.
And again, like I said earlier, Henry, we have more of an opportunity to step on each other's toes. And in any good marriage, you realize that very quickly that you've married someone who does life differently than you do. And so in that, you can tend to get into power struggles of we're going to do it this way or we're going to do it that way. And the system that you've gotten down over all this time of in a relationship or marriage is going to be all turned upside down because the system around us has changed. And so the patterns that you're used to, maybe used to using to avoid conflict, maybe I'm going to take a time out, I'll go to the office, or you'll go to the office, I'll take the kids to the store, just isn't available anymore. And so you're having to learn new ways to conflict with each other.
That's good. Well, here's and this one kind of ties into what you both have been saying. If we have a family that has some unresolved conflict, but we've just never felt like we had the time to deal with it. Well, now we've got time. Do you think it's wise to try to deal with unresolved conflict, or do we just kind of suppress that until things get back to normal?
So I think it really, Henry, depends on what the conflict is. Just know that unresolved conflict, because you're in closer proximity with each other more often, is going to come up. And so stuff that you haven't really worked through will come up. Now, is it the best time to work through it? Well, it really depends on what it is. There's going to be some conflict that couples or partners have had for a long time and they haven't been able to work through. And that may be a great opportunity, if you know it comes up, to put a pause on that. Maybe put that on the shelf. Maybe saying to your partner that you know what, this probably isn't the best time for us to work through this because we don't have the tools to work through this because we haven't been able to work through it before. So maybe we just need to shelve this until a later date. Or, as Dr. Sevadjian said earlier, most counseling practices have moved over to a virtual format, including us at Sparrow House Counseling. And so there is counseling available to couples. And you've got more time probably than you've ever had in your entire life to be able to work through some stuff with a therapist if you need to. Okay, and Dr. Sevadjian, maybe you can add to that.
No, I think one of the things that you pointed out that was super helpful is it may be a good time to sort of look at your role or your contribution in an unresolved conflict. And it may not be a good time if the conflict is with this other person that's gone on for many, many years, maybe like a parent-child, that kind of a conflict. Might be best to table that, just because stress can intensify emotion. And so sometimes when that emotion gets really high, we're not able to communicate well with each other.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, that's really good.
Especially in things that are more deep-seated.
Yeah, good. That's very wise. Well, how about this one? And this is a two-part question. The first part is a yes, no, and it's, do you recommend keeping children on a regular schedule if this quarantine drags out any longer? And then the second part is, what does a healthy schedule look like?
Yes, that's great. I'm going to go ahead and take that question. First of all, I wanted to add one little part in there, just because I've been noticing with my friends and family, I've gotten a lot of questions about what are signs of stress in kids. So I'd like to go over that really briefly. I know that wasn't part of the question, but I think it'll be helpful to people. Because we know that kids, even as young as preschool kids, are absorbing some of the stress that we're all feeling as adults. So in our preschool age range, a lot of times you can see increased clinginess, increased temper tantrums, more behavioral difficulties, even sometimes some more bedwetting or fear of being alone. In our sort of elementary school age kids, so 6 to 12, we might see more irritability or whining, clinginess, more nightmares, disturbances in sleep and appetite. They might be competing more for parent attention and might be complaining a little bit more about tummy aches and headaches. And then in our teens, we might see some of those, again, those physical symptoms like stomach aches and headaches and sleeps and changes in sleep and appetite, more agitation, more isolating, more avoiding, more arguing more. So those are all those behaviors can be difficult to deal with on a daily basis, but especially the more time you're spending with children. And so one of the things that we think can help reduce stress in children, or we know, is to maintain a structure and a schedule, which kind of feeds into your question. Since most, or I think all schools are pretty much around our area, moved to an online format, it's good to kind of set up a structure typical to a school day, kind of mimicking that. We know that children do best if they know what the plan is for each day. So we would encourage continued regular wake-up times and bedtimes. This is a little trickier, I think, with teenagers, but really encouraging that that's what's going to help them feel well. You're going to follow how the schools outlined the online school schedule if they provided it. Sometimes they may not have given sort of strict structure to it, and so it may be that you have to add some of that structure. And if you think about with kids, for the most part, and teenagers, working in those 30 to 45-minute blocks, that's often like what their school schedule is like, is a really good plan. So work in that 30 to 45 minute, take a 10-minute break or so, and then get back to the information that they're supposed to be taking in for school. You're also just going to want to make sure that they're keeping up with their virtual assignments, more so than you would at school, because a lot of times you're getting feedback from the teachers and things like that. So you're going to want to just kind of be able to monitor that well. It's going to remain important for kids to have exercise and being active during the day, because we know that helps with better sleep and it helps them stay calmer. So playing in the backyard, games, running, being on a play structure in your backyard, those are all great ways to keep that going. So, for an elementary school kid, working some and then having that playtime is going to be really helpful. The other thing is we want kids to stay socially connected during this time. So, for some of our high school kids that are used to having sort of a 45 or 50-minute class, or if they're on a block schedule, maybe it's a little bit of a longer class, and then maybe they have about 10 or 15 minutes between those classes, they may want to just FaceTime a friend shortly, or maybe they're Snapchatting a friend or whatever they're able to do virtually, to kind of almost like mimicking that hallway passing period where they're able to socialize. It also can be a good time for them to do movies or games over FaceTime with their friends, especially for the older kids. The one just word of caution, we want to still as parents be very vigilant about monitoring our kids being online, since obviously they may be online more. We know there's still those dangers with predators and inappropriate content. Those dangers still exist, so we want to be vigilant about that. Another part of just maintaining a good structure to your household is just good nutrition. If keeping kids well fed helps limit meltdowns and behavioral problems related to hunger. You also are going to want to discourage bored eating. A lot of times kids during the summer, it's hot, they can't be outside as much, get kind of bored and start requesting snacks and just eating more. And that's where having more fun activities and having more of a structure with school and things like that during the day will hopefully cut down a little bit on that bored eating. And then just continuing to monitor children's responses to extended stress. So one thing that you may see that's very frustrating for parents is more sibling fighting. So you're going to want to work with them on resolving problems. So great time to practice, kids being able to extend grace to one another, working on forgiveness, working on how do you ask for forgiveness in an appropriate way. Also, they just may need some space. So you may have kids, you may send one child outside to play while keeping the other two inside, and vice versa, just to give everybody a little bit more space, especially if your home's a little bit smaller and they can't get that at home. And then you're going to want to continue to monitor for changes in mood or any excessive anxiety. Just with so much stress right now in the world, children and teenagers definitely experience that. So I hope that kind of answers a lot of questions, not only on schedule and routine, but also how to just help support kids and love them through a difficult time.
Yeah, that's really good. There's a lot there that I think team members are going to want to listen to several times. So added to that, what about the couples that maybe mom and dad both worked out of the home, but now they're working from home, and oh, by the way, your kids need to be homeschooled, and that's something they've never done before. Do you have any coaching for parents? And some of the answers you just gave tie into this, but what about that tension for the parent that I've got work to do, but I also need to homeschool my kids, and this isn't something I've tackled before?
Henry, that's a great question. Years ago, my wife and I, when we had our first child, we have 4 now, decided that we were going to take on the task of homeschooling. My wife was a elementary school teacher. I was teaching college at the time, and we thought, hey, we've got this. And we realized very quickly, after we failed miserably at homeschooling, that we were not parents who were equipped to take this task on. And so this week, when everything fell in our laps again, we had a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety come up. But we realized that a lot of the schools are doing a great job of getting assignments out there online to the kids. And so knowing that, hey, listen, it's very difficult. Most of us are not in academia, and it's really difficult to teach your own children. And so you've got to have grace for each other during this time. It's just an understanding that maybe not everything's going to get done. You're going to do the best job that you can do, but at the end of the day, that's all you can offer. Also realizing that this is just temporary. This isn't going to last forever. And during this season, while you're just doing the best job that you can do with your children, realizing that there is an end to this. And especially with both parents working, it becomes very difficult because the kids are inside. And as Dr. Sevadjian said, excuse me, one of the important things to do is to make sure the kids get outside. And so maybe with both parents working, you have to take kind of the tag team approach where the dad will take, or one parent will take the task of teaching and educating the children during the morning, where the wife or the other partner is working, and then switch. And it's also important to get out there and be able to play with your kids, spend time with them outside, because up until recently, a lot of us didn't have the opportunity to do that, and you get the opportunity to do that now during the day. And so recognizing that you've got to have grace for each other. You've got to have patience for each other. You've got to have grace and patience for the kids, because their anxiety is up also. And as Cristina said, there's probably going to be more sibling fights, more crankiness, and maybe more of an unwillingness to do things that you're asking them to do. Not everything has to get done every day, and that's okay.
Yeah, a word you both keep using is grace, and I think I can't think of a
Yes.
more appropriate word as we go through these days. Hey, this next question is this one was a hard one. It's I've lost a loved one and I'm unable to attend the funeral due to the quarantine. How do I get closure?
That's really
Yes.
hard. That's a really hard question. Cristina,
Yeah.
why don't you want to take some of that?
Sure. Yeah, we do know that typically attending a funeral is really important for someone to have closure. It's, we don't have in this day and age in our country a lot of ritual around death and dying. So we know the funeral is actually one way to get to be with family and have some ritual around that, which really helps people as they're grieving. We have a couple of ideas. Obviously, this is not ideal, so you're doing the best that you can. If there's any way to virtually attend, because I know at this point in time, usually it's just the closest of family members that are maybe attending the funeral. But if there's any way to virtually attend, that could be helpful. We also thought about perhaps planning a memorial at a later date so that more people could attend. And maybe if you're the family member that in your grief and not being able to be at the funeral, you want to do something. A lot of times people that are grieving do want to do things. Planning that memorial or a family get-together to honor the family member that's passed away can be really helpful. Another way is just finding a way to honor that person that's passed away. So, whether that's donating to a charity that was meaningful to them, or finding and looking for ways that you can maybe serve that charity that was important to them, that honors them in some way. Those may be some different ideas. Talking to family members about how you might want to remember that person at the next holiday when you guys are all able to gather. Those are just some ideas. We do know people, when they're grieving, some people need just to be able to express their emotions a lot about that. That's kind of one griever. And so making sure that if you're that griever, that right now you're calling, you're able to call a family member, call a friend, and really talk through how you're feeling. And then other grievers need to do more action. And so that person may be the person that might be planning the memorial or planning the special moment at the next family gathering where that person can be remembered or honored.
Yeah, those are some really good suggestions.
Let me just add to that of what Dr. Sevadjian was referencing, is just the importance of being around and being able to connect with other family members, even if it's in a virtual format. An important part of the grief process is processing itself, being able to talk to each other about thoughts and feelings. And even if you cannot be in attendance and you don't get to say that goodbye at the funeral, you can still write the person a letter, read it out loud to other family members, and just spending time, like I said earlier, even if it's in a virtual format, with other family members who share and understand what's going on.
Yeah, that's, it's interesting that when you talk about the virtual attendance and the schooling, because of technology, we're able to do things today that we couldn't have done 20 years ago. You would not have these answers 20 years ago, but today we can because of technology. I also like the idea about the memorial service later. Unfortunately, with a wedding, you get plenty of time to plan for that, but a funeral, you don't. You get a few days. But in this situation, that could be an opportunity to plan that memorial service and make it exactly the way you want it. So, those are great ideas.
Yeah.
Well, how about this one? What are some verses that you would recommend to memorize if I'm struggling with worry and anxiety? And I like that question because it acknowledges the fact that there is worry and anxiety, but it also is looking for a way to wrestle with that by memorizing scripture. So are there any that you all would recommend?
I'm going to give just a few for children. I think when we're thinking about giving verses to children, obviously adolescents are able to, memorize some longer verses like adults. I think for children, just keeping them pretty simple. I really like Psalms 56:3. When I'm afraid, I put my trust in you. I love this one. This is John 14:27. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid. And then there's another one, Deuteronomy 31:6. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified because of them. For the Lord your God is with you. He will never leave you or forsake you. And even shortening those down to even some of our younger early elementary kids, I think that's really helpful. I've been talking to families during my virtual sessions about this is a great time to really lean on your faith.
Yeah, that's good.
I think, Cristina, I love that, that during these times of unsettledness and worry, that we just cling to truth. And, we've always got truth available to us. I really like Joshua 1:9. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and be courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. I also like Philippians 4:8 and 9. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. What you will have learned and received and heard and seen in me, practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you. And Henry, in particular, with Philippians 4, 8 through 9, we're so inundated with information about this virus. And most of the information we receive is based more on feelings than on facts. And the feelings that we're inundated with are just fear and worry. If you go, on the news on your phone or on the TV, you talk to your neighbors, it's not about the factual aspects of what's happening right now. It's a lot of what could happen or worst case scenario thinking. And so it's not focusing on, what is just and pure and lovely. It's focusing on what causes fear. And it's really hard to get away from that.
Yeah, and we stay glued to the TV sets, and so I think there's some wisdom there in not doing that so much, because it'll be on 24 hours a day if you want it to be.
Yes, Henry, I think that's what's different in times past when maybe there were difficult seasons, Vietnam War, or when we were worried about the Cold War. We didn't have these 24-hour news cycles. So what I've encouraged, I know I'm doing this for myself or trying to, and what I've encouraged clients to do is maybe pick 1 or 2 times a day when they're going to check, and then trying to go to really reliable sources, not more entertainment news, but really more factually based news, I think is very helpful. But limiting the amount of intake is going to be very important for people.
Yeah, that's good. It's interesting too, because both of you were rattling off verses that could help with anxiety, and I think another takeaway for me as you were sharing the verses is that if you are feeling anxiety and fear, there's nothing not normal about you, because Scripture does speak to that a lot. And so don't be ashamed or embarrassed.
That's right. And I think, what I tell people is, a lot of times as Steve and I are psychologists, we're helping people with maybe irrational fears. Someone has a fear of spiders, what the fear that they put into that can be irrational. What I've been telling people is the fear they're feeling right now is a very rational fear, because we're in a very, it's just a very hard, uncertain time. And so if you're feeling that fear, we're all feeling that. And I think that's really important for people to understand, that that's a very normal, valid feeling.
And I think there's comfort that comes in that, Cristina, that knowing that we're not alone. That everyone is going through the same thing that we're going through. There may be different situations, but we're all impacted by this. And so all of us, to some extent, are going to wrestle with worry and fear. And Henry, what you said, it's earlier, it's very hard to ignore what's out there. And this is the topic of conversation with everyone. And it's very hard to get away from just having this conversation, or to limit yourself to even access to everything that's on the computer and TV, because it's in our faces all the times. And so everyone's anxiety and worry is a little bit heightened. And I think even more so now, that's why it's so important just to ground yourself to truth, the truth that only God can provide.
Yeah, that's so good. Hey, this question is a little bit longer, but it's very pointed, and important as well. So it's one of our team members writes this. She says, what are some tips to encourage a loved one who is on edge? Our kids are doing pretty good. We are keeping discussion high level in front of them and focusing on staying home so we don't share germs. My husband, however, is pretty stressed, not sleeping well, and he said he will work on it as far as processing his stress. What would you tell her?
I think that's a great question and really timely. Kind of big picture, I think it's good to know that couples tend to deal and cope with stressful situations in really different ways. So some individuals really like to talk through things and share their feelings. Some individuals like to really kind of think more internally and then just share information that they've really thought through. And some just find it difficult to really talk or communicate at all about how they're kind of managing the stress. And so I think it's good to kind of know, hey, your partner might be dealing with this in a very vastly different way than you might be. And I'm going to let Dr. Lytle talk about some healthy ways that for adults to just be able to cope through this.
Thanks, Cristina. Reading through this question, Henry, just hearing what Dr. Sevadjian said in response to this is that we all do process or deal with our stress a little bit differently. I may want to encourage this person to encourage the partner to put words to his feelings. So feeling stressed is usually caused by the thoughts that we tell ourselves or the narrative that we create. And so encouraging him to first and foremost admit that he is stressed and he is anxious, and that's okay because everyone is during this time. And then to put words to what feelings he's having. For example, when I'm stressed because I'm telling myself that the world is very different now and I don't know what it's going to look like when we come out of this, or I'm stressed and I'm anxious because I don't know if I have a job next week, or I'm stressed and I'm anxious because I don't know how it'll impact you or myself or the kids if one of us gets sick. And so being able to put words to the feelings is a really healthy part of processing. If he's not willing to, or if he's having a hard time being able to process this with you, maybe encourage him to journal it down, to get those thoughts out of his head and put them onto paper, or if possible, to find someone else he can process with. This is all part of being able to do what we call emptying your cup. And so when your cup is filled up, if you picture yourself as being a cup and you picture all the stress and the worry and the day-to-day activities that you encounter or all fill your cup up. And the fuller that cup is, the less reasonably you are able to handle things. The harder time you handle, being able to understand what's going on or being able to, interact with your family. So it's very important to be able to empty the stress out of that cup, and exercise, if at all possible, is a very good way to a very good way to be able to start to empty your cup. So I mentioned processing earlier, being able to talk about what you're feeling, what are the thoughts behind those feelings, and then getting up and getting out and exercising. Dr. Sevadjian talked about the importance of children being able to get outside and take a break. And when we found this through research, that kids do much better if they have a recess break. Well, adults are no different. If we can get up and we can get out and exercise, be active, we're able to think through things a little bit more clearly. We're able to understand more what we're feeling and what are the thoughts behind those feelings. Also, I think it's really important to be able to just stand in truth, like we talked about earlier, there's going to be a lot of thoughts that are going to creep into your head during the day. It's a lot of what we call what if thinking. And it's all future focused thinking of what's going to happen. And, if you turn on the news or listen to the TV, it's a lot of worst case scenario thinking. It's very sensationalized. And so your anxiety is going to be up. And so it's important not to, as much as possible, not focus so much on what if this happens, but focus on what now. What now can I do? And one of the what nows you can do is just to stand on truth. Dr. Sevadjian mentioned John 14:27. That just talks about the peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. And I don't give it to you as the world gives it to you. So let your hearts be troubled and do not be afraid. So it's just really, really, really grounding yourself in what's truth. That's a good cup emptier. Exercise, being able to process and talk about what's going on limiting your access to all the news, all the opinion-oriented news that's out there is extremely important. Not just filling your head with this, and focus on what now can I do? And it's hard, Henry, because a lot of us. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Dr. Sevadjian.
Oh no, and I think this is a time too. I know that this can happen, with Christians and unbelievers alike. We can get into some negative coping strategies such as, excessive drinking or other substance abuse, and we really want to stay out of that kind of stuff during this time because it's really going to be counterproductive.
Yeah, because all that does is it puts a lid on the cup, but it doesn't empty your cup at all. And as soon as the chemicals of the substance start to wear off, everything's still in there. And now you don't feel as well or as equipped to be able to handle it. And so being able to, not just do things to empty the cup, but being able to limit what goes in there. As I was going to say earlier, we're all drawn to what's sensational. And unfortunately, this news is that we hear, we're all drawn to it. We want to see what's happening. This is why people, when they drive by a car wreck, they want to see what's going on. We're all curious about it. What happens, though, is when we get pulled in, we tend to get pulled down. And so every time you're pulled in, you tend to click on another news story or another news story, and it pulls you farther and farther in. And none of this is going to fill you or lift you up. It's all pulling you down. And while there may be some facts in there on what's happening with the virus, there's also a lot of just fear-based type of news that's out there. And so it's not really doing much for you except pulling you down. So as Dr. Sevadjian said earlier, trying to limit the contact you have with what's going on a feelings perspective, and try to limit your news to what we think is factual or not factual. Last, it's important to sleep and be able to rest. And I know it's very hard because when things quiet down, that's when our minds tend to get more active. There's a couple of great apps that are available to help you rest at night. One of them is called Headspace. It's a Headspace app. It's mindfulness-based apps that help you work on relaxation and calming down. And a Christian version is called Abide, Abide. And I think you can get both of those for both operating or phone operating systems. Those are really good to listen to at night to be able to help you calm down and take your mind off of all the worries of the day.
Yeah, that's good. I really like the heart of the woman that asked the question because she wanted to help her husband process this or work through it. So a little sidebar from that question. What do you think the struggle is for men to talk about the things that they're concerned about? Because maybe the men are concerned about the finances. Am I going to have my job? Am I going to be able to feed my family? What is the dynamic there for men that prevents them from opening up to their spouse and saying, "Hey, these are some things I'm kind of anxious about"?
I think, as a husband and a father, I think myself, I put a lot of weight on my shoulders, and I don't want to burden my spouse with the feelings that I'm having. If I know my spouse is stressed out, I don't want to share my stress with her because I don't want to add any of my stress to her plate. And the same with the kids. And so as a man, I tend to take up the mantle and put it all on my shoulders. Right or wrong, I think that's partly how we're wired. And we also have a hard time just admitting when we're struggling. We see it as a sign of weakness, and I don't want to be seen as weak. And so I tend to just keep everything bottled up inside. The problem is it's still there, and it's important for me to get it out of my head. And even if I feel like I'm going to have I don't want to burden my spouse with that. There are people who I can call and who will listen to me, who don't feel that I'm putting this burden on them to carry. And so even so, if I don't feel like I can do that with my spouse or my partner, it is important for me to be able to share that with someone. Yeah.
I've told men for years that the words "I'm struggling" or "I'm hurting" to either a spouse or a friend, those are not words of weakness. Those are words of great strength. And sometimes I think we don't believe that necessarily. Hey, here's another question. That's a specific question again. My mother is living in an independent living facility, and we are not allowed to visit. They are being highly encouraged to stay on campus and limit contact with others. How do we help her remotely to feel that she's not isolated and cope with the changes in her daily routine?
That's a great question. I know I have a 97-year-old grandmother who's also living in an assisted living community, so I know that this can definitely be a challenge. I think, first of all, just contextually, older people tend to have more difficulty dealing with or coping with disruptions and changes to their routine. That's just difficult for them. So it's important to validate their feelings of whether it's anxiety, frustration, anger, loneliness. Even if you might be a little frustrated yourself that, hey, aren't you understanding? They're trying to keep you safe there. But to just validate that this is hard for them, this change in routine is hard. Next, I think it's important to problem solve how they can maintain their social connections. So with family, like we've continued to talk about throughout our time today, Henry, we've talked about, virtually connecting, doing FaceTime. FaceTime's pretty easy, so most, even my 97-year-old grandmother does a really good job of that. Talking about virtual activities, like are there things you can do together over FaceTime? And then I think just helping other family members, maybe doing a separate family group text to just say, hey, grandmother is, feeling kind of lonely. Maybe we can set up a different schedule of times when different people can call and check on her or FaceTime her. If their facility is allowing it, maybe suggesting that if they're not going to dinner downstairs or they're not doing some of those big group activities, if they're still able to, go and play cards with a friend in their, in their little apartment across the way, I would still encourage them to do that. And then also reminding our older friends that this isn't for forever, but we are having these measures take place to ensure that they stay healthy and safe, and that's the priority. But I think the forever thing is what's hard, and so just helping people understand this is temporary; it's not going to go on forever and ever.
Yeah, that's good.
I like what Cristina had said earlier. Just the importance of being able to connect, and we do have access, Henry, as you said, also to means that we didn't used to. So FaceTime, Skype, Zoom are just ways to continue to stay connected. And also, I think a great activity for kids during the day, which Henry, I think you had mentioned, is being able to write to people in nursing homes, because there are people in nursing homes who really don't have much contact with their family, or who have very limited contact with your family. And so it's great to be able to reach out to somebody.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. It's it's interesting. That's a hard dynamic for folks that have someone that's older, because they're concerned too about just being connected to them, and they're more susceptible to the virus. So there's some anxiety and all of that. Hey, the next question. This is for single team members. What counsel do you have for them who are alone at home? Because a lot of folks we're isolated at home, but we're surrounded by our families, so we're not really alone. But what about the single team member who is alone? They're isolated, but they're also alone at home.
So I think that's a great question, and it's great to realize that there are people who do live alone, who don't have much contact with others, except as to when they go into work or when they're allowed to leave the house or go to the gym. And so they may not have that ability anymore to go do some of that stuff, but they can still connect. And again, that goes back to what we talked about, just being able to connect in any way possible, even if that's just virtually, and being able to reach out to friends and coworkers, to family during this time. If you can, get outside. God designed us for a relationship. So isolation is extremely hard for us physically, spiritually, emotionally. And so it's a need that we have, is to get out and to connect with others. And during this time, it's a lot more difficult because we can't do that in person. And so being able to, if you can, go ahead, Dr. Sevadjian.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I thought you paused. It's a little hard to do this remotely. One suggestion is, there may be team members who have, they have these single friends on their team, and they may be getting kind of tired of their kids' jokes and performances and such, but their single team member might kind of find their kids really amusing and fun during this time. So I know,
absolutely,
for one of my single friends, hey, if your kids need an audience, connect with her. She has a medical condition and, she lives by herself and she can't get out right now. And so I think that's another way you can look after your team member. Perhaps it's a way your child can be entertained, which can be really helpful, kind of hits things on a lot of different levels. And I think for those single people to reach out to their friends, their friends at work, their friends through church, or their friends in the community and family, and just say, hey, I'm going to be by myself for a while. I know my youngest brother is single, and he went on a trip, and so that is now has to be quarantined for the next 14 days on his own, and he's very social. And so one of the things he told us is, hey guys, if y'all have a break or you're bored, please call me, because I'm gonna go a little stir crazy here by myself. So I think it's totally great for people to reach out to their friends and family and just say, hey, I'd love a phone call or a FaceTime from you.
Yeah, that's
Cristina,
good.
you're right. I mean, it is so important. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm hoping that part of the fruit that comes out of all of this is that we truly realize how valuable our relationships are, because I think it's easy to take those for granted. But as we go through this and to go, wow, I really love my friends. I love the people I go to church with. I love the people that I work with. And maybe when this is behind us, we're going to have a greater value in that and appreciate it more than we do right now.
Yeah, I think that's so important, is to be able to realize that the things that maybe have distracted us before, the activities that we participated in that didn't really allow us to connect with others, we have an opportunity to do that now, and to put some of those distractions aside and reach out to others and try to connect.
Yeah. Well, hey, here's the last question I've got. And again, thank you guys so much for the dialogue, and I thought you all worked together really well. So, and the insight, this is going to be one of those things that we're going to be listening to several times. I'm not sure how long this is going to last, but this is definitely worth a re-listen and a re-listen. So thank you for that. But here's the last question. The flu kills far more people every year in every country than COVID has over the same period of time. Why is there such a big panic over this?
Henry, that's a really great question. Yeah, Henry, that's a great question. So I do want to say, since this was a more medical question in nature, I did consult with physicians to make sure that I would be providing accurate data. So here's kind of the differences between COVID and the flu. So the data shows that anywhere from 10 to 20% of people will become infected and require hospitalization. So that's a much larger amount than the flu. And if that 10 to 20% require that hospitalization, that would overwhelm our current healthcare system. And that's kind of like what we've seen in Italy, right? So that's a big kind of major difference from the flu. We also know that the mortality rate of the coronavirus is anywhere from 3 to 6%, while the mortality rate for the flu is more like 0.1%. So it's exponentially greater than the flu. So that's kind of why there's, again, more concern. And so that's why the social distancing, and obviously we're going to great lengths, great economic lengths, great business lengths to do this social distancing, because it's really important that we can help, like we've seen those curves where we flatten the pandemic. That way our medical systems are not overwhelmed. And so a graphic that we kind of sent around on our Instagram, our Spirit House Instagram, was just, that's why loving your neighbor really looks like social distancing right now. It's a great way to actively love your neighbor. So hopefully, from this question, the person can see this is actually much different than the flu, just in kind of the consequences. Also, I think what we've seen in the news is that people seems to take people longer to feel better. And that a lot of people feel much sicker than when they have the flu. So hopefully that information really helps people understand the big differences and just encourages them to keep doing what they're doing, which is practicing the social distancing. And Henry, I did want to just say, we are on our Instagram, our Spirit House Instagram. We are constantly putting out helpful tools from how to talk to your kids about the virus, kind of like ongoing, how do you talk to your kids about the virus, to many of the things that we went over today.
Good.
I think Misty also has access to those resources. So if people want to contact her, I know she can disseminate. We made a lot of PDFs handouts of some things that we found that would be really helpful to people from our trusted, our trusted kind of academic resources. So we have all that for people should they need it, should they want more information.
Oh, that's great.
Part of our ministry, Henry, is to be just a resource to the community. And as Cristina said, feel free to reach out to either she or myself anytime if you have questions or any way that Sparrow House can help, or any way that we can individually help you guys find the resources you need.
Yeah, we sure will, and I'll have Misty get that information on the Instagram, and we can post that as well. Golly, the hour went by quickly, and I'm so thankful for both of you. And just know that you've made a big difference with our folks. We've got some great feedback on these podcasts that we're doing because they want to hear truth, and to hear truth from a biblical perspective that you all have provided today is going to help incredibly. So again, thank you for that. If I could, can I close our time in a word of prayer?
Yes,
Absolutely.
we'd love that.
Okay. Father, we just want to pause and say thank you. I'm thankful for Stephen and for Cristina to share with us today. I pray, Father, that you would bless them in their labor. I'm thankful for the resources they're providing to help the communities and the families. And so, Father, I just pray that you'd bless them again for this great labor. Father, I pray for all of our team members that are wrestling, that are home today, that the insight that we've heard today will help them grow stronger as a family. I pray that the fruit of this, when this is behind us, that we would love our families more, that we would care for each other more, that we would connect with each other more, realizing in the absence of that, just how valuable it is. I do pray for our leadership. I pray for our medical community, that you would provide for them. Bless them too, Father, for the doctors and the nurses and the scientists that are working on this with great vigilance. And I pray that you'd bless them in their labor too. But we're thankful again for this time on a Saturday afternoon to chat about topics that are concerning to us today. But we are thankful most of all that we have a God in heaven who loves us. We have a God in heaven who allows things to happen in our lives for reasons we don't understand, but we always know there's a purpose in the midst of this. And I pray that we would draw closer to him as we walk through these days with great courage, great hope, and great love. We pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. All righty, gang. Thank you very much.
Hey, thanks again for taking the time to let us come speak to you.
You bet. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.